Now back to Ian Furness on Seattle Sports Radio 950, KJR.
All right, welcome back to Sports Radio 950 KJR here in Seattle. Ian Furness with you, and just looking back, I was telling Kevin Shockey, it's been nice. We've had a couple times to have a conversation with our next guest over the last 12 months. The first time was actually about 12 months ago, and it wasn't the most pleasant conversation because we're kind of going headfirst into the pandemic and COVID. We're starting to work our way out of that, and then obviously the last time we talked to President Kirk Schulz from Washington State University, we were talking about he's part of the 3-member leadership team to hire a new Pac-12 commissioner, which has now been done. And that commissioner has been hired. First of all, President Schulz, thanks for joining me today. And looks like things are going well over in beautiful Pullman, Washington today.
Yeah, we're doing great. So I felt like for about 2 months that I was working for the Pac-12. Those searches, I know there's a lot of people interested in it, but glad to be part of it. We're looking forward to having students back in the fall. And any of the listeners who've been over to the Palouse know May, June, July, it is just absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous over here. So campus looks great. The trees are blooming, and we're already getting excited for the fall.
Well, let's talk about the new hire that you were a big part of, and along with presidents at Washington and Oregon, among the 9 conference presidents, chancellors, etc. George Kliavkoff is the new commissioner. I think I hit that right. If not, we can call him something else. Is it George K? Is that what he wants to go by now?
George K, I think, will work just fine for our purposes today. So
I like that. You told me back in January you wanted a commissioner to come in and map a pathway for national championships, including, and most importantly, the big 2, which would be football and men's basketball. Let's talk about George and start there. Is he the guy that can get you there? You obviously feel confident he can.
Absolutely. We had 2 full interviews with George as part of the process, one with the search committee, one with the full board. Top candidate, blew everybody away. He had vision. He was dynamic, nice guy, and really brought forward some ideas on revenue generation. And that was really an important thing for us to hear. So, when you hire somebody like a commissioner, it's like hiring a college president. Everybody wants everything. And at the end of the day, you go, well, we got 80%, but what about the 20? And if you get somebody that is really a talented leader, they're going to worry about either hiring staff to help with the 20% or educating them really quickly. And that's where we came down with George. So lots of energy, excitement. I hope that you guys can have him on early on during his tenure as commissioner. I think it'll get our fans all cranked up about the future of Pac-12.
I think it's an interesting note what you said about, it is like a university president. You want everything all encompassing. And I think so many of the fans and even fellow media members, I thought, they're looking kind of like just like a specific thing. And a lot of it came from television, like you got to have a guy that can understand TV, but then you have to have a football guy, then you have to have a basketball guy and all these things. What I saw from his resume was someone that is well-versed in a lot of different things, including media and promotion and marketing and imaging and building a big business. I mean, all due respect to athletic directors that you could have spoken to and probably did speak to, it feels like his resume is about as complete as you could get for this particular job.
We thought so. And look, all leaders you need a certain set of skills for a certain period of time. And George brought that set of skills. And look, if you really look at all the stuff that we need to do, and you talk to most of our football coaches, men's basketball coaches and stuff like that, if you say, what's the one thing that we need to do? They'll talk about revenue. First thing, got to close the gap with everybody else. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, certainly we got a guy who understands the media and he can get the media deal done. And people kind of place that off to the side like it's some trivial task. That's the number one thing that we really need is we got to close that revenue gap between the Pac-12, the SEC, the Big Ten. And we really need a person to come in and really do that. And I think George has got that background. Interestingly, he knows personally most of the individuals he's going to be sitting across the table from. That doesn't mean you're going to get a better deal, right? These are all businessmen and women. But at the same time, you got somebody with an established relationship and trust. And that goes a long way in today's business world about getting where we need to go.
And when you say sitting across, you're talking about the network executives, whether it be Fox or ESPN, Disney, what have you, because he worked for NBC Universal. Those are the people. Right. So he speaks their language, I guess, is how I would put it, right?
Exactly. And has demonstrated success at building deals and being creative. Did some really interesting things with Major League Baseball and their digital content, and just a creative thinker in that particular space. So that was important. But one of the other things, Ian, that you mentioned that I think was really interesting is everybody's looking sometimes for a magic bullet on revenue. And so you want somebody with a bold vision, but you also sometimes want somebody that comes in and says, here's some things we can do immediately. And one of the things George talked about is he said, games like the Apple Cup, the Territorial Cup, that should be a national that should be a national event. And if we market those well, why does everybody interested in the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama? And you go through some of these other rivalry games. I know they don't call it this anymore, but the largest cocktail party in the world. I grew up in the South, and everybody knew that was a Florida-Georgia game. You have those kinds of things, and we've never had a commissioner sit in there and say, hey, we're going to brand these marquee matchups, and we're going to work it. We're not just going to kind of float something out there, but we're going to work it and make these national. And I think if you start looking at some of the marquee matchups that we have in the Pac-12, that we just kind of do a ho-hum job of talking about it. And George is, even though he's in our footprint, right? I mentioned to him, what about the Oregon-Washington game? And he was like, well, is that a rivalry? And it was, the reason I mentioned that is here's a guy that lives in Las Vegas. It's not like he lives on the East Coast. And that's the kind of holes we have on our marketing side is let's go brand these games, get sponsors for them. That's more money to the schools, better exposure to the Pac-12. This is not something that requires a new media deal. This is the kind of stuff we can do immediately. These are the types of things George came in and talked about in his interview with specifics and said, here's stuff we can do today.
I love that. President Kirk Schulz from Washington State University, part of the search committee to hire George Kliavkoff, the new commissioner of the Pac-12. As soon as you said that, I thought the same thing, Oregon and Washington. That's a marquee matchup. You have two fan bases that are basically exactly the same, looking in a mirror at each other, and they hate each other because of it. And it's great, and it's fun. That's what football's all, and rivalries are all about. It has been marketed. Side note, maybe we can find a commissioner that can talk to the networks and not have the Apple Cup played on a Friday in Pullman after Thanksgiving, which is just ridiculous and ludicrous. I mean, all those things that kind of hurt the conference, and it feels like you have a guy that has a vision. You said, one more thing just to kind of reference the last interview, you expressed a concern over the Pac-12 networks, and your quote was, just not what they had hoped to be.
Right.
What needs to improve with the Pac-12 networks besides revenue? I mean, everyone talks about revenue, like you said, but what needs to improve there? And what's realistic? What does he think can realistically improve?
Yeah, I think he's mentioned this in several other places. I don't think I'm stealing any thunder here. Just access. I should be anywhere around the country, and I could see easily the Pac-12 teams play. And how many of us, including myself, have been traveling during a Pac-12 season, and I'm swearing at the TV because I can't get our men's basketball game, or I can't get this, if I'm not in our exact footprint. And look, I've heard from fans all over about the frustration of it's just hard to get. And that's really one of the other key things is it needs to be in everybody's household, like the Big Ten, like the SEC, like the new ACC network. And look, if we've got to get what he's saying is, maybe we don't have to own the whole thing. Maybe we go in with a partner. Let's look at some kind of things here, because that accessibility is really important to our product in the long run. And I completely agree with that. As presidents, one of the things I have to do is if something's not working, you sometimes have to say it's not working and let's try something else. And I felt with the Pac-12, we probably stuck with our model way too long when it clearly wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. And now we got a new guy coming in and he's going to look at it with a fresh set of eyes.
President Kirk Schulz from Washington State University joining us. One of the things I heard often was people saying, "Well, Larry Scott was following the lead of the presidents in the conference in this area, that you people in your shoes don't feel as if football and men's basketball are a priority for the conference athletically." I always bristle at that because you and I have spoken a few times. I don't think Michael Schill would share those sentiments, and you hired somebody that said that is the priority. It feels like it is a priority, men's basketball and football, and not to diminish the other sports, but because those are the revenue generators.
Well, and hey, the bottom line, and this has been pointed out multiple times, if you're successful in men's basketball and in football, and that generates more revenue, more exposure, that helps volleyball, that helps soccer, that helps all the other programs in the Pac-12 as well. And so I think at some point you just have to say, hey, we are proud of the Olympic sports and all the national championships, but we've got to be nationally relevant in these other two things. And look at men's basketball. We had some challenges in that a couple of years ago. Excuse me. We got the coaches together, developed a plan, executed. You saw what happened in this year in the NCAA tournament, how well we performed. And I think we can do the same in football, but it's going to take us acknowledging that what we're doing is not what we want to, and we got to keep moving there. But that's our marquee brand. Football is going to be really critical, and people philosophically will argue with that. To me, that's the reality of where we are today, and we need to acknowledge that reality, and let's go build our brand even better than we had before.
I know you've been part of the college football committee and oversight committee and all those committees and sitting in meetings and memos and emails, all those things, and when I say that, you probably have looked at this college football playoff a little bit as well and said, hey, we've got to change this up. It's the same 4 teams every year. How important is that to expand the college football playoff, and how can that be accomplished?
I would put that as the number 2 major issue facing the Pac-12 behind closing the revenue gap. We've got to be in the playoff, and I think conference champions should have an automatic slot out of the Power 5 in the playoff. So to me, I'm just right up front. I think we need to expand it. I want to aggressively push for that. The Pac-12 wants to push for that. You heard the new commissioner say, again, out of the gate, hey, that's important to us. So I've got a meeting in Dallas coming up next month to talk about this. And, hey, we're going to push really, really hard. It's important for us to get our champion in there because, look, you all have been following sports for a long time. Sort of any Saturday, anything can happen type of thing. And look, there'll be teams in our conference that are peaking at the right time, and they're going to show up, and all of a sudden everybody goes, wow, look at the Pac-12. They're playing the national championship. Who would have thought that? We just need that opportunity, and I'm pretty optimistic we'll perform well.
Well, you're behind the 8 ball, too, of the 9-game schedule. I mean, you're not playing an FCS school in November. I mean, it puts you in. I always like college football to me is like boxing. You have one blemish, it's over. Your career comes to an end, and that's kind of what it is in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I've worked at an SEC school for a while, and let me tell you, the fan base was not super excited by those FCS games in November because that was in the thick of things. People are trying to win a divisional championship, and it was pretty acknowledged those games didn't really do much of anything. That being said, whether one likes Alabama and Coach Nick Saban or not, to me, you got to respect the job the guy has done there. Yep. Year in and year out. He takes 5-star kids, he molds them into, what looks like sometimes an NFL team on the lines there. And so, whether they have to play another game or not, at least Alabama in the last decade, I don't think it would have made any difference. But
no, I don't.
What we've got to do is close our talent gap. We've got to have the revenue to make sure we keep the really talented young people on the West Coast playing for Pac-12 schools, and not have a player out of the Bay Area or Los Angeles or Seattle go, well, I could go to UW or WSU or Oregon. No, I'm going to go to Alabama or Georgia. I mean, to me, we got to stop that. We need the kids that grew up here playing football here and basketball, frankly, to stay in our footprint and help us get better.
We circle back to something before I want to talk big picture before I let you go about what's going to happen with Wazoo in the fall in your school specifically. Before I get to that, circle back to the coaches that you talked about with college basketball. What was that conversation? What needed to change? What took place with that conversation with the conference's basketball coaches?
There was a lot of talk about scheduling, out-of-conference scheduling, and everybody needing to up their game in terms of out-of-conference scheduling. And it's amazing the difference that sometimes those types of things make. But that was our coaches working with our athletic directors. That wasn't a directive from above. But when you get a bunch of people in the room and say, what is it going to take to get better? I think it's also looking at charters and, are we moving our student athletes around in a way? It's great to be cost effective and have everybody fly, for example, commercially. But if you miss a couple extra days of school and elsewhere in the country, people aren't doing that, it affects their performance in the classroom. So I think it was, we just need to do the same with our football coaches and be willing to have an honest conversation, say, what is it going to take to close the gap? And I'm convinced you get some of those folks in the room, they're gonna have a pretty good idea of what we need to do or think differently going forward. Maybe that's an 8-game schedule. Maybe that is all of us agreeing to play a Power 5 school as one of the out-of-conference games that's gonna elevate our entire brand. And Ian, you remember a couple years ago, right? When we had such a spectacular year with Gardner and stuff, our out-of-conference schedule probably hurt us getting into those Final Four games. I mean, that we won as many as other people did, but when you started looking at that out-of-conference schedule, that just didn't do it for us. And those are the type of things that are going to be important.
I would agree. Hopefully, I'm sure if we're hearing charters that Cam Etheridge and Kyle Smith are saying charters, hey, hopefully that's I don't know if it's realistic in Pullman right now. Hopefully it is with the way those two programs are trending upwards. I'm sure, and then the key to that is getting people in the stands. It was tragic we couldn't have people watching your women's team last year, and certainly what Kyle has going in basketball is really special. I mean, that recruiting class is never – Tony Bennett didn't do the same thing in terms of recruiting that Kyle Smith is doing, and I'm sure Coach Rollo is looking for that as well. So the multi-million-dollar question for all the Coug fans: will we have fans in the stands for football, and then maybe men's and women's basketball, volleyball, everything else in the fall?
Yeah, yes, I believe we're going to have fans in the stands. Now, whether the stadium will be 50% capacity, 75%, 100%, that just depends on where things going. UW, WSU, the Seahawks, Mariners, we are all talking with each other about what we're doing in the state and how we're managing that. So, the issue is today, I can't say we'll be 100%, but as people get vaccinated, as we determine what requirements will be to get in the stadium, it's to our advantage to get as many people safely in that stadium as possible and have people come and have to play in front of a full house in Martin Stadium. That's what we want to get to. And the question is, how close can we get to that? And certainly for basketball, I think by that time, I think you're going to see pretty much full houses. I believe that. I would like to just pause for a minute and think, if you said Cougar men's basketball, Cougar women's basketball, and NCAA tournament in the same sentence, 3 years ago, people laughed. They were like, oh, whatever. You guys aren't even winning 10 games a year. But we've got a real shot this next year of putting both men and women in the NCAA tournament. And I just think that's a testament to Pat Chun, our coaches, the recruitment. And, one of the things I learned from Mike Leach when he was here and I was first talking with him is, he said, hey, if I go to Los Angeles or whatever, I'm going to sell Pullman. I'm going to sell it's different. It's not I'm trying to compete against LA. What I'm trying to do is say, hey, small community, we're going to take care of you, these different kinds of things. We've got coaches now that have figured out good ways to turn Pullman into recruiting advantage. Not, gee, I wish I was in LA. I wish I was in the Bay Area. I wish I was in Seattle. And that makes a big difference. That attitude of, hey, let's go get somebody and sell them where we are is really, really important.
Well, I don't think there's ever been a time in Pullman, and I went there and started in 1983, that you've had all of the big team sports go to the postseason in the same year. But I think, next season that's realistic with football, the two basketball teams, volleyball's there every year. Soccer's there seemingly every year. Baseball's on the rise. But that goes back to Pat Chun. And I'm not sure. I've never seen a better twosome in terms of president and athletic director that we have right now. The collaboration, obviously, the chemistry you guys have working together seems to work. You've been at other big schools. You've been at other Power 5 conference schools. It's a unique relationship you have.
Well, thank you. And we've got a good set of people here. And I just believe, the old adage that athletics is the front porch. I just believe when I walk, through Atlanta, Georgia, and I got my Cougs stuff on here, go Cougs, and stop and have a conversation with somebody, It inevitably is around somebody watching football, watching men's or women's basketball. They've got a friend that went here, whatever. That national brand is important to us. And people say, well, we want to win. But what I like about Pat is we want to win the right way. And we have the highest academic achievement of student athletes in our history at this current time. Football, men's and women's basketball, it's amazing. It's really stunning. So we're winning on the field. We're winning in the classroom. Fun time to be a Coug.
Final thing for you. You showed some leadership, as has Washington. I think every school, public school besides Eastern so far, Vaccinations required for your incoming students. You said getting people back in the stands. That's a huge part of it. We're seeing that with the Mariners. The Mariners have taken that leadership, with vaccinated sections right now. I think they're almost like the guinea pigs. Like, how does it go for T-Mobile Park? How does it go for the Sounders? How does it go for the Storm? That'll be probably how it goes for the colleges. But just a final quick thought on you and why it was important to make sure that people get vaccinated in the fall.
Clearly in COVID, we've all missed the personal interactions. And I think in a college community, it's not just the classroom environment, it's all the other parts of it that help a young person to grow. And I think we missed that this year. And look, we want it back, whether it's athletics, classroom, people going to the Coug, you pick whatever part of the WSU experience. We felt strongly the more people get vaccinated, the more back to that kind of experience that people are going to have. And that was really the reason we were first out of the gate. But I like to tell everybody we were in the gold medal position in the state. We led the way. I'm proud of the fact that we led the way. And look, we got some pushback, but pretty modest, frankly. Most people, I think, said, hey, we get it. We understand it. And looking forward to having a packed Martin Stadium, lots of students around, packed restaurants in Pullman. It'll be a great fall for us.
President Kirk Schulz, I really appreciate your time. We took a lot of it. I know you're a busy man, but the folks over here in Seattle on the west side of the state, I know appreciate hearing from you and getting kind of a state of the Pac-12 and a state of Wazoo address from you on occasion with us. Thank you so much. We'll talk down the road.
Sounds good. And nice jersey on this morning. So I like that. Go Cougs.